have any. So I don't have any specific things prepared today to show. So I'll tell you what, there is actually one thing I should have covered yesterday, though, a new feature. And that ties in to that SDLC question, Alfonso. So new feature we've got for configuration management. So there is a feature now where you can get a snapshot of the account configuration. So that's things like your groups, org types, points buckets, and things like that. So you can capture that as a file, a snapshot, and then so you would do that on staging at the start of your development cycle. And then when you're ready to go live or to deploy to production, you'll generate a new snapshot. And then there's a tool there to calculate the diff, right? To tell you what's changed.
Oh, so, awesome.
Yeah. So I think so the way I think this is best used is as a check. So I think you should still have a manual process to keep track of changes. And I think that makes sense so that you can put it in a spreadsheet somewhere and you've got an explanation or a reason why you've changed something. I think that's important. But then you'll be able to cross-check, right? So it's a way of making sure that you have captured all of those changes. Which will just make it a more robust process. And this is really the first stage of this feature. The next stage will be to actually generate a deployment package from those changes. And then the third phase will then be to be able to apply that to production. So you generate a diff, so that'll be what groups have been added or deleted, or what changes you've made to points buckets, etc. That'll go into a file, and you then apply that to production. And that will include the set remote hash, right? So it'll include the hash of websites and apps. Well, probably not apps, actually. They're best managed through the marketplace, but definitely websites. So then you can just apply that whole deployment package into production. So that's a little bit away. That's probably going to be, 6 weeks away until we finish all of that. But for now, it is functional that you can capture those snapshots and calculate that diff, so you can see what's changed.
Oh, that sounds exciting.
Yeah.
Sounds really
awesome.
Great.
Yeah. I'm really buzzed about it too. Actually, I think it's something that we tried to do years ago. We tried to do a backup and restore feature where you could back up your entire account and then restore it, with the idea this would be, this would facilitate that deployment. But it was just way too complex, and it could never work reliably. But I think the reason why is because it was including configuration and data. And that was trying to synchronize data is just horrific. It's so complex. So now we've really narrowed the scope, and we're saying, right, well, we're just doing configuration. And it's not, you don't, and there is that step of actually, well, there will be that step to actually generate a file with the changes that you want. Because that was one of the problems, that when you're doing a restore, you kind of need logic to try to figure out, is this new, or is it deleted, or is it changed? And it just got really too complex. So now with what we're doing now, it's a much simpler workflow, and I think it will actually work. So yeah, well, or at least be, what I mean, like actually be usable in a practical sense.
Yeah, that's great.
Cool. Okay, so we've got Tara and Emily on the call. So good afternoon, everyone. So just FYI, hey. So yeah, I am recording this session. I plan to put it up on YouTube when we finish, so we can refer back. It is public, so avoid speaking about anything client related or sensitive. Okay. Cool. So I have no particular topics to cover today, so I'm just sort of throwing it open. So if anyone wants to bounce any questions off, go right ahead.
I'll start.
Go for it.
KCRM and KTeams. Could you talk to that?
Yeah, absolutely.
There's so much that can be done, and it's just amazing, but I'd like to have a better understanding.
Yeah, absolutely. So the intention here from a design perspective is that we start with a really clear delineation between brand and channel, right? So if you've got a particular client that's a brand, let's use Apple, all right, as a fictitious example, right? So they're a brand, they have a product and they're selling through a channel, which is, your various IT resellers and things. Right, so you've got your brand, and that includes all of the sales reps and the hierarchical managers, region managers, territory managers, etc. So anyone who is a direct employee of the brand, they're on the brand side. And then we have the channel. So that's all of the dealers, right? So people who are not, in this example, employed by Apple. So Bob's IT shop or Dave's mobile phone shop or whatever, right? So they're all your dealers. So if you start with that understanding, we have brand and we have channel. KCRM is for the brand and KTeams is for the channel. Now, the reason for that difference or that delineation is on the brand side, we understand that these users, they're direct employees of the owner of the program, right? So you can talk to them, you can tell them what to do and what to not do, you can give them training, and there is an understanding there is a certain element of complexity because they want to be able to report within the context of this organizational hierarchy. So they're going to drill down through regions and territories and states and, things like that. So they want that functionality, which means there is some complexity that goes with it, which means there is some requirement for training as part of rolling that program out to them. Now, on the channel side, it's quite different, right? On the channel side, you're talking about, Bob, the manager of Bob's computer shop and Dave, the manager of Dave's mobile phone shop. They're in a much simpler situation. It's just a manager and their employees, right? So there is no hierarchy. It's just a manager of a team. All right. And so because it's simpler, that means the user interface is simpler, which means we don't need to train them, which is good because it's really, really hard to get people like that to actually, if you had to train them to use your program, that would fail, right? We need to dumb it down. So that's the difference, right? KTeams is designed for a very simple user experience, a very flat hierarchy. Just a manager is a manager of a team. The team includes employees, right? So super simple. KCRM is more complex, right? You're managing organizations within an organizational hierarchy. Those organizations have members in them, right? It's a much more complex structure to work within. So KCRM is for the brand and KTeams is for the channel. That's sort of my view of things. How does that sound?
That makes perfect sense. And yeah, definitely helps me understand that a little bit better.
Right. Now, having said all of that and having said this is a really clear black and white, there's no ambiguity. There are exceptions, right?
I knew it.
So the one that, but quite possibly that will not actually affect you in any of your current or future programs, right? But the one edge case that we're aware of at the moment is with deal registration programs, right? So when a brand wants their channel to register deals, in that situation, the channel, so the dealer is registering a deal, and you will want that deal to include end customer information. Now, the only way to do that in Kademi is KCRM, right? Where you register a lead and the lead has structured information about the end client. So that that does happen. I think it's probably it quite possibly will not affect any of your programs because deal registration. But I mean, it's quite a specific situation. It tends to be low volume, high dollar value. So yeah, but that's the only case we're aware of. Every other situation, what we've built works really great in practice. That KCRM is for the brand and KTeams is for the channel. So yeah.
Okay, great.
Cool. Yeah, and obviously that does mean that you have, if you're doing that, you would need two different websites, one channel facing website or participant facing website, and a second website which is for your brand employees, so all of that sales force hierarchy, sales reps, managers, etc. So 2 different websites, 2 different experiences. And again, that usually aligns with what people want. You know, the brand employees, they're very focused on reporting. I know that's something we've spoken a lot about recently, the need for really good focused reporting, and that is delivered through KCRM. On the participant side, they're more focused on the particular participant activities they need to do, which can include some reporting. A manager needs to be able to see what their team is doing, but we handle that more through specific components rather than the sort of an overall reporting framework, if you know what I mean.
Yes. Okay. So you should go ahead and create those 2 different websites. So you couldn't control that with just user visibility or anything. You really want that separation. Right? That's
right. Yeah. You want to keep your brand and your channel clearly separated. They're very, very different types of people with very different requirements. And yeah, so we do have a support request underway. Chris is working on it to do a guide to building those reporting dashboard sites. So that'll be up in a blog article on Kademi early next week. And as part of that, we've actually identified a few components that we want to improve to make that an easier and better experience. So yeah, early next week, we'll have that all documented and tidied up and everything.
Okay. Excellent.
Cool. Right. Yeah, I was thinking I'll put a screenshot. It's probably nothing really to show just at the moment, but yeah, it sounds like you got the idea. Cool. So yeah, any other questions?
I have others, but I want to give anyone else an opportunity to jump in.
I have one about an app, KJSON Data. It says it allows you to create NoSQL style custom databases. Is this just allowing you to read and write JSON, or is it actually different from the data series? And does it actually do something different, or?
Yeah. Okay. So yep. Great question. So in Kademi, we have a whole bunch of different ways of handling data for different scenarios. The KJSON DB has a specific role in there. So what that's for, so basically KJSON DB is your hammer that you can use to bang in, you know, any screws that you've got. You know, it's to handle the situations that can't be handled any other way, right? So if you need to capture sales data and generate awards, right, sales data series is definitely the way to go. We've got great features to support that. With the JSON database, you can store JSON data in there, but nothing happens to it, right? There's, you know, it's a perfectly generic thing. You can throw any data you want in there, you can store it, you can query on it. But there is no, you know what I mean? There's nothing in Kademi to award points or anything from it because it's generic, because it's anything. So in reality, what it's normally used for is it's normally used with custom apps. So for example, the sales claim app, it stores claims in the JSON database. And when a claim is approved, it generates data series records from the claim items, right? And it's those data series records that we calculate points from, right? Raffles, for example, the raffle data configuration is stored in the JSON database. What's another example? You know, polls and surveys. You know, all of those apps, they all store their data in the JSON database. So if you're using the JSON database, it's because you're writing code to do something custom, right? So it's great because it means you can do that, but then the downside of it is it means you have to write code, right? You know what I mean? So that's what it's there for. Yeah. It's a gap filler, if you like.
Thanks.
But no worries. It is handy, by the way, to get to know it for the purpose of troubleshooting. So, you know, for example, if there was, you saw some problem with sales claims, you're not restricted to just looking at what you can see in the admin screens. You can go and open the JSON record directly for each claim, which sometimes is good. You're seeing that data directly, and also you can edit it, right? So again, just normally as a part of troubleshooting, you can sometimes edit those JSON records, change the values, and see what happens. Yeah, things like that. And of course, you can write your own queries in Elasticsearch to query them. So if you needed to do some custom reports, things like that, then it's good to get to know it.
Gotcha. You don't have is there a location where we can go to learn more about that, or?
It is covered in the developer training. Actually, I think when I was in your office, I was talking to Gianna about kicking off some dev training, but we haven't heard anything more about that. Do you guys know, is that going ahead? Are you going to get started on that, or
Might be
are you waiting for us, or
question, or?
I think it's still on discussion about who needs to be in that and when we can do it. So I can follow up with.
And look, you like to do the dev training, you definitely should do it as a Kademi led thing, right? You'll get the greatest benefit in the shortest time by doing that. But just putting it out there, you can just go right on over to here. I'm sharing a screen, dev courses, and you can access all of those tutorials right now. So if you have the time, start with the introduction. This one's super quick. It only takes about an hour. Alfonso, I'm pretty sure you've already done that. Brandon, yeah, that's right, isn't it? Yeah. And then the next one is templating controllers. That really gets into the heart of how to develop in Kademi. You should definitely do Kademi coding practices. That's got some really key information on how to be secure. Like, it's really important that you follow standard practices to avoid introducing security vulnerabilities. Then the integration, yeah, that's really good. That's all about the data import export stuff. Super important. App builder. So the app builder is obviously how to build apps, but that includes the JSON database. All right. So that's worth looking at. Now, by the way, these things say locked, right? When you see locked on a tutorial, all it means is that your progress towards certification won't be counted, right? You've got to do them in order for them to be marked off as having been complete. But you can still view them. If it says locked, you can still just jump right in and have a look at it. So you can go in here, and here you go, creating your first app with the JSON database. And this has got, it tells you that it can't save the fields and things, but don't worry about that. Yeah, so it walks you through that whole process of creating that app. So you don't need Kademi to do the tutorials. You can jump in and do them now. Having said that, I definitely do recommend using Kademi's instructor-led process, because what we'll do is do assignments at the end of each course, which we then review and mark. And that's really important, because that picks up where you've misunderstood something, and it's important to resolve that early before you then go and build on it. What we find is if you just go through the tutorials by yourself, it is going to take you a lot longer, and there will be moments of frustration because you won't understand why something's not working, and you'll think, oh, Kademi's terrible, I hate Kademi, nothing works. But yeah, it's just a little bit of instructor assistance makes it all a lot easier.
And Brad, I know that I think I've done the very first module on developer, and I was like, wow, that might be a little bit out of my league.
Right.
But I noticed reporting does fall into the developer, and that's actually why I had started looking through the developer training. Is there a plan to do reporting outside of our reporting modules outside of this developer learning?
Yeah, I mean, that's where yeah, this is where we do have some features, but yeah, that's where there is a danger that Kademi, we don't want to invest too much into ad hoc reporting features, because then we're starting to build out a BI framework, which obviously that's a huge thing. So you do have the ability to, I'm sure you've seen this, I know Alfonso has, you can go in and you can create queries from here. Actually, I'll move that out of the way. All right. I'm sure you've seen that. Once you've created a query, you can then use the query builder user interface. There it is there. Right, so you can add conditions on all the different fields. Expiry date is less than something, and etc. And you can choose what fields you want included. I'm just clicking completely randomly here. Right, and that includes aggregations, which is really powerful. So you can get, you can select data series and you can calculate the sum or the average, etc. Do terms, things like that. And then once you've got these queries, you can then connect them to our reporting components. So you can, so if you're generating an aggregation on, say, terms, it's an example, city name, I guess, is an example. You can then connect that up to a pie chart and see how many users you've got from each city, for example, right? Or if you aggregate by date, you can then connect that up to a histogram component. So you can see, sales by date or things like that. So that's that's the sort of the level of custom reporting that we think is appropriate for what Kademi's role is. So it's not a full-blown Power BI or tool or anything like that, but you can do a lot with that. Those queries, by the way, you can then hop down to the reporting section. So a query is not a report. A query is just, it's sort of a low-level thing. It just generates data, but you can then hit add a custom report, and you can choose from one of these tables, which includes queries. A table is not necessarily a query. There's a few different ways of generating tables. Right, and then hook that up, and that's your custom report. And then you can, once it's a report, it's then in the reporting framework. So you can do things like, you can create a scheduled email, and then you can select that report, and it'll be included in that scheduled email when it gets sent. So that query, creating the query is sort of the lowest level, and then once you have that query, you can go in a couple of directions. It can be plugged into either a custom report, which lives down here on the reporting page, or you can use it with our reporting components in a front end. So that's something like a KCRM dashboard site. And you can also hook it into your scheduled emails so that your clients can be sent, each month, send them a report on, points awarded or users registered or something like that.
Okay, and I think that's more along the lines of what I was thinking of, is like, would there be like a high level reporting training just showing you what functions are available to just create quick reporting, maybe admin dashboards and things like that. So
yeah, I don't know if that is actually covered. There is actually, now one thing you'll notice is that with the tutorials that we have in here at the moment, they're very focused on building programs, like setting things up, and there's less focus on that sort of management of a program. So yeah, I'm not sure if all of that is covered. And to be honest, I'm more familiar on the developer courses than I am on the non-dev courses. So
understand.
I'll just make a note to check, see what we have there that covers that. So just making it. Now, so I mean, it is worth just bearing in mind though that the query builder that I showed you, its main limitation is that because this is using it's not using a relational database, it's using a NoSQL database called Elasticsearch. And the main limitation there is you can't do joins, right? So if you've got, you know, so one index has all your profiles in it, another index has your points in it, you know, you can't join them together the way you would normally do with a SQL database. In practice, that's usually not a problem because Kademi does a huge amount of denormalization. So like the points index includes a lot of information about the profile. And, you know, so, and generally, you know, that's how things are done. We denormalize when information goes into the index. And the great thing about that is it means it's always going to be fast. Any query that you can write in Elasticsearch will be fast. Whereas obviously, I'm sure you know with SQL, you can do a couple of bad joins in there and queries can take minutes to run. Right. So that's why it's kind of safe for us to offer that as a custom, as a DIY query building tool, because we know it's not going to, you know, crush our servers. So that's the main limitation. And that limitation does have a pretty easy resolution. If you're writing a query and let's say you need to pull information into your query that's not there in the index, it's a pretty easy thing for a developer to do, to add fields to an index, which will pull that information from somewhere else. So let's say, for example, you wanted to show the user's birth date, you know, along with their points. I'm pretty sure we don't have the profile birth date field in the points index, but a developer can just, in about 5 lines of code, add that field and that will pull the birth date into the index. So once it's there, you can then obviously use it in your query.
Okay.
Cool. Okay,
Sounds good.
So I've made a note there just to check our tutorials and I'll check that after the call and fire an email out. Okay. All right, next question.
Well, if nobody else has one, the sales tagging. So we're kind of going through that right now. Mm-hmm. And I'm kind of wondering, how is sales tagging different than like sales claims? So somebody can upload a claim, mm-hmm. but with sales tagging, it looks like it's they have to approve it. So I'm still a little confused on the sales tagging.
Cool. So so sales claims is for when you're collecting sell out data, right? So when your client, a brand, typically a brand will have the sell in data, so they'll know what they have sold to their channel, to their dealers. But what they don't know is what has been sold out from each dealer to an end customer, right? So that's what claims are for. You know, so if you've got your client is a manufacturer of fridges, for example, they know they've just sold 100 fridges to this particular dealer, but they don't know of those 100 fridges, you know, when each fridge gets sold or by who, right? So that's what we're collecting with claim is each, you know, person, you know, selling fridges in the shop. Well, when they've sold a fridge, they go and submit a claim, and it's great. So we've got that information now. Claim tagging is for when those 2 bits of data, the sell in data and the sell out data, are connected, right? So if you know that you've sold 100 fridges to a particular dealer, and especially if you know their serial numbers, then instead of making the retailers enter all of the information about what they've sold, you can just let them choose, right? Of these items, which have you sold? Okay, so that's the difference. The sales claim process is when someone is entering all the information about what they've sold, right? Because we know nothing, right, about what they could be selling. Whereas sales claim tagging is when we know what has been sold, we just don't know who sold it.
Okay.
Right, so the user just logs in and says, yep, I sold this one, and this one. Now, both claims and claim tagging, they can both go through an approval process. The difference is with claims tagging, you know, there is a, you know, you have to, there is a real risk that just that one, you know, you've got 5 people working in a shop and just one bad person is just going to go through and click on all of them, right? Just take everyone's sales, right? So that's why with claim tagging, you know, it's more open to abuse. So you really need approval. Whereas with sales claims, particularly if you're validating the serial number, you know, you might often actually be very confident. If someone has entered legitimate information, it's a valid serial number, that serial number has not been used before, then you might just award the, you know, grant them the award immediately without any manual approval. So both situations can have an approval workflow, but don't need to. But claims tagging, you will almost always have an approval workflow, whereas with just claims, I don't know, it's probably 50-50 as to whether you do or don't.
Okay, that makes sense.
And by the way, I hate the name claim tagging. It's like, it's you know, someone said it once and it stuck. And I was like, no, we are not calling this claim tagging because it's a dumb name. But yeah, I got overruled on
You were
that.
overruled.
Yeah.
Okay, I think that was all the questions that I had.
Cool. Anyone else? All right. Well, that sounds like we. No, is there one more?
No.
That's
there
cool.
will be at some point. But.
That's cool. Yeah, and look, that's why I'm thinking I'm quite happy to run a couple of these each week. So, you know, questions come, and it can just be anything. It doesn't need to be you know, anything exciting. So yeah. Well, look, if there's no more questions today, then I will upload this to YouTube once we're finished, and as long as you guys are all happy with that, I'll flick you over a link when that's there, just so you can refer back to it. Yeah, and when we schedule the next ones, I'll fire an email out with that as well. So, and by the way, if no one wants to go, then it's fine. I'll just jump on the call anyway, and if anyone turns up, then have a chat. But if not, then that's fine. So don't feel obliged.
We appreciate your time, Brad.
Yeah.
No problems at all.
Thank you.
Awesome. All right. Thanks, guys. Always a pleasure talking. And yeah, see you next time.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Bye.
Thanks.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.